Hi there, you're listening to the Estranged Heart podcast, and I'm your host, Kreed Revere. Welcome back to our returning listeners, and if this is your first time here, thank you for selecting this podcast to listen to. As we begin today's episode, I invite you to grab a cup of coffee or tea, settle in, and listen with an open heart. But first, the regular disclaimer. I am not a licensed therapist or counselor. Nothing within this podcast should be considered or taken as therapy. If you are in need of therapeutic support such as counseling, please seek out a therapist near you. Hi there. Today's episode is a bit different in style and format, and I hope that you like it. Uh, as always, I welcome feedback, so let me know what you think. Um, Before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to just give a reminder that registration is still open for the 2 Zoom support groups that will begin next weekend. So that would be on Saturday, February the 4th, 2023. And if it's something that you're interested in, please email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. One support group is for estranged moms only. If you are currently estranged, then this would be the group for you. And the second group is for moms who are reconciled. Um, if you are currently reconciled, recently reconciled, and would like support, please email me for more additional information regarding that group. I will say that the Zoom support group for the estranged moms has not gotten a lot of traction, and so unless there's enough attendees, then that group will not move forward. However, the Reconciled Mothers support group, there's been an interest in that, and that one is moving forward. So, again, you can feel free to email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com for additional information on how to register for one of those support groups. I also wanted to just briefly mention it's been interesting because I've gotten quite a bit of pushback on the episode I did on boundaries. And the only thing that I want to say to this is I would invite you to consider why that episode has been so upsetting to you. Because it's not about what I said. um, it's about how we perceive things and how we take things, right? Um, and so if we are uncomfortable with something that someone says, um, that's always for me an invitation to inquire further as to why I'm uncomfortable. And it could be, in just in general, in life in general, if I'm inquiring about why something is not setting right with me, it could be, it runs against my ethics, or you know, puts my integrity in question, or that hit a sore spot, and I don't know why that's sore. And so maybe I need to look into that a little bit further. And I get it, right? Boundaries are something we're not taught. Although I have to, I have to push back on that a little bit, because I think that we are taught boundaries. We're just taught boundaries in a very unhealthy way when we are children. And so the boundaries for many of us were hearing our parents say, "Do as I say, not as I do," and enforcing harsh boundaries on us. And so anyway, again, that's an invitation to dive in and kind of check in, see what why is that upsetting to you. And I will leave this topic to rest with this final comment, and that is all relationships, all healthy relationships need boundaries. They have to. They absolutely must have boundaries. Um, and so if you're thinking for whatever reason that the relationship with your adult child or the relationship with your parent doesn't need boundaries, I would invite you to reconsider that. because oftentimes where we get off track and end up in estrangement is because we've had no boundaries, and that it just makes for a very unhealthy relationship. And that goes for parent child, employee employer, the neighbor, your relationship with the neighbor, your best friend. It doesn't matter. Every relationship needs healthy boundaries. Every healthy relationship needs healthy boundaries. Okay. So on to today's episode. And today's episode is titled The Many Paths Estranged and Reconciled Mothers Walk, a collection of stories from an estrangement and reconciliation coach. So I have taken some stories of some of my clients, and without revealing any identifying information, I wanted to share some of these stories with you so that you can understand and hear a little bit more than um, than I typically talk about, from very specific. These are real people. These are real relationships. These are real estrangements and real reconciliations that have happened. And so I want to talk about that. And because I think that there's not at one time, there's not ever a time when I sit in coaching sessions and think that the information being shared, stories being shared, feelings being shared and expressed could not be helpful and beneficial to others. So again, keeping um, keeping confidentiality in place, that's a huge thing for me. But I do want to share some stories that I have found inspirational and some that have absolutely broken my heart. So, and if you're an estranged adult child listening to this episode, um, I invite you to share your story with me. And if that is through coaching or just simply emailing me to share your story, I am open to hearing that as well. And I am willing, more than willing, to do an episode such as this, but from the stories of estranged adult children. So again, you can email me at theestrangedheart@gmail.com. Okay, the quotes for today, I have several, and some of them are actually from a previous episode that I utilized there, but they were so appropriate for today's episode that I wanted to share them again. So let's getting on with the story. Your perspective will either become your prison or your passport. And that is by Stephen Furtick. You never really know a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. Atticus Finch, and that's from To Kill a Mockingbird. Perspective. What you see depends on not only what you look at, but also where you look from. That is by James Deacon. Reject your sense of injury, and the injury itself will disappear. Marcus Aurelius. Your perspective is always limited by how much you know. Expand your knowledge, and you will transform your mind. And that is by Bruce Lipton. So let's begin. I want to begin with a story that absolutely broke my heart. And I'll begin with the heavy piece, and we'll end on a happier note. So bear with me as we process through this. So I was contacted by a mom who um, is quasi estranged from her adult child, and um, when I met with her, it was interesting because generally when I have folks schedule for a coaching call with me, I have had some sort of communication with them, and I'm expecting the scheduling of their appointment. And so when this notice was received of this scheduled coaching appointment on my scheduler, I looked at the name and it didn't ring a bell with me. And I thought, well, I wonder who this person is. The name kind of sounded familiar to me, but wasn't something I knew for sure that I had not had conversation with this person about a coaching session. So I was intrigued, and decided to move forward with it. I mean, some coaches won't even move forward with that, but I decided to. And so we show up on Zoom, and this mom um, basically proceeded to tell me just how pissed off she was with me about one of my episodes. And um, took me, it took me aback. I mean, quite frankly, when people are not happy with an episode that I do, generally I get a negative review on the podcast. They don't meet with me in person, right? Or via Zoom. Um, or they'll send me a nasty email. So I was quite taken aback, and immediately thought, well, oh my goodness, what do I do now? How do what do I do? And so I put into practice all the things that I do in a coaching session, and the things that I start off with. And so I um, acknowledged that she was mad with me, and then I let her talk. And she talked for the hour that we met. She talked for about a total of 50 minutes of that hour. And throughout that time that she spoke, um, she was angry, 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 so angry. She was angry with me. She was angry with her adult child. She was just furious. And I continued to listen, and I did not interrupt. And um, finally, towards the end of the time that she spoke, she I could begin to see her soften. And when we first showed up on Zoom, it was very apparent just by her body language that she was pissed off with the world, right? Just her facial expressions, I mean everything, and then and her tone of voice, and then by the end of the time that we met, um, she softened. Her tone of voice began to ease, and was not filled with so much anger. And so I validated her anger. So this woman reached out to me, was furious with me, told me, I mean, let's give this woman credit for the bravery that she showed in going straight to the source, right? She did not hide behind a nasty podcast review. She did not send me an email. She went straight to the source. She wanted to talk to the source. And I applaud her bravery in doing that. Most people would not do that. Um, and so I wanted to acknowledge her anger. She was mad. And I know that her anger was covering up pain and hurt and fear. So, um, so I listened. And at the very end of our time together, um, I validated. She was in tears. She had finally reached the point where she started to cry. And in releasing that bottled up pain, that all that anger she was spewing everywhere was covering, was this pain came forward through her tears. And I validated her pain. I validated her anger. Um, and she said to me, "You know, I came into this world not being wanted, and I guess I'll go out not being wanted." And my heart just broke for her. Finally, at the end of that hour call, she felt safe enough to tell me what was really causing her pain, causing her fear, her anger. And this is why I do the work that I do. Because I know that all of the surface behaviors, and in this case the anger, those are mask. They're not the real thing. They're not the real reason that people are doing what they're doing. The real reason for her was her pain. She has not felt wanted in her life. And she fears that in leaving this world. So, I know this was a heavy story to start off this podcast with, but it was one that just reached down and twisted my heart every which way. And so it was something that I felt that I just had to share because it was a perfect example of what we experience as estranged parents when our children are angry with us, they're shouting at us, they're lashing out at us, they're in, implementing estrangement, and in the silence, all of those things are surface things and they're covering something much deeper. And when we can get to that piece, and 99.9% of the time, that is something emotional. When we can get to that piece, it changes everything. That's when the healing can begin. So, I want to tell this mom, if she's listening, I appreciate you. I applaud your bravery and your vulnerability. I want you to know that I may not know you, but I can tell you that I believe that you have value in this world and that you're needed here, regardless of what your adult child says. And feel free to reach out to me at any time. Okay. Moving on to the next story. Um, I have been working with an estranged mom for many, many, many months. And I believe we started our work together last summer. And um, she has um, more than one child and is estranged, was estranged from one of them. She's now reconciled. And it's been a hard road for this mom. She really struggled in the beginning um, with trying to understand. None of this made sense to her. She was angry. She was mad. She was, when we first started meeting, she was a bit flippant with some of the comments that she would make. And I just continued to show up for her, right? And she was committed. I have to say she showed up for every session. If she had to reschedule, she rescheduled and she showed up for that session. And I know that there were weeks and times when she wanted to just um, tell me to go pound sand, right? But she stayed with it. And she had been um, estranged for a couple of years and had not had in any contact, or I think just very minimal contact with a grandchild. And so we dug dove in and started doing the work, and I gave her homework assignments, and um, she had had some experiences with some other modalities, and so she combined all of those and just really continued to show up. She There were times when she would show up and she'd be just livid, just so angry, and then other times she would show up and she'd cry for most of the session, right? But the important piece is that she showed up. She kept showing up. We learned about trauma, right? And the trauma that was showing up in her life, in her childhood, and then some of the traumas that showed up for her children, and the difference in how her kids dealt with those different types of traumas and things that were happening in their life. Um, and I have to say, it wasn't like when talk about traumas, a lot of people think of the big T traumas, right? For this mom, it was the little T traumas, and there weren't a lot, but there were some. And her estranged adult child just dealt differently with things. Um, and that was a struggle for this mom to understand. She was like, I just don't understand this. This kid is the only one who has struggled with things. And while I as an estrangement coach would probably beg to differ with that, um, that wasn't my job at that point in time. My job right there was to help her to understand that one child, and to help her to move through that. So, long story short is that she has recently reconciled with her adult child, and they are now um, communicating. Um, Not anything like it was, but they are communicating. They have had visits, multiple visits with one another at each other's home, and the future looks hopeful and bright. And I think what's important to remember with this mom is that she stuck with it through all of the ups and downs. She did not, and she practiced the pause, right? She was willing to come in, and as much as she wanted her adult child to be back in relationship with her adult child, she did not force the issue. There were a couple of times when she got a little excited and kind of pushed a little bit, and when I say pushed, it was just um, you know, making suggestions of get-togethers when her child wasn't quite ready for that. And I have to give kudos to her adult child, because her adult child said that. She spoke up and said, I'm not ready for this just yet. And the mom honored that and continued to just put one foot in front of the other. And so they're now, like I said, they're now reconciled, and they're moving forward with their relationship. And and I am so proud of this mom. She has done tremendous work, tremendous work. Um, and the biggest thing I said, like I said, is that she stuck with it. She understood that this was not a quick fix. When we started coaching, she understood that, it wasn't going to be 2 sessions with me and she was going to be reconciled with her kid and everything was going to be hunky dory. Like I said, I've been working with her. Um, we started off weekly and we went down to biweekly, but for months and months, we have worked together. So um, she was willing to do what it took for however long it took. And so kudos to this mom. I'm so proud of her. Just so proud. um, Another mom who is um, estranged from her adult child, her only child. Um, we've recently started working together, and this mom is, man, she talk about diving in. She's she takes notes, and when we have our sessions, she shows up fully prepared, and then not only that, but she's practicing her homework. And the homework is oftentimes things that ways of being in the world that are different than what they're used to and what's been habitual in their life. And so I encourage the moms that I work with that are currently estranged is oftentimes I'll hear, well, how can I, do any of this if my kid won't talk to me? Right? And I'm like, you can do it every day. You do it with your partner, with your spouse, with your neighbor, with your coworkers, with your friends. Get that practice in. And that's what she's doing. And she's excited about it, right? Doesn't mean that she doesn't show up and she cries. There are times when she's really distraught. She misses her child. She misses her grandchildren. She too understands that this is a long haul. It's a marathon, not a sprint. And so we are working together. She's been estranged, like I said, for a couple of years. She and her child were very, very close, very close. And she now recognizes that that was not healthy. And it's been interesting to her, right? She has found it very interesting. She's been curious. She's gotten very curious about, why did this happen? How did we get here? And then coming up and just making her own discoveries. And with that, she's gotten curious. Oh, isn't that interesting? Wow, how did I think that, having this best friend relationship with my kid was healthy, right? I see now that I saddled her with a lot of responsibility that wasn't hers to have, right? So again, a mom who showed up a mom who too had significant trauma in her childhood and didn't know what she didn't know, but she recognizes that even though she did not know what she did not know while parenting her child, she knows that she caused harm, emotional harm, and that her adult child does not feel safe with her emotionally. And so that is what we were working on. That's what we're working on together, is making all of the people that she's in relationship with to feel safe with her, so that when the time comes that her daughter gives her another opportunity, she's able to step into that with purpose and intent in a way that allows her adult child to have the freedom to be who they are, as they are in the moment, and understands that their lives are separated. They're different, right? They're not together. They're not one unit, as was how they were during her child's growing up years. So so there's that. Um, okay. So I'm so proud of this mom and her dedication. When she reached out to me, she was like, "I am willing to do whatever it takes and however long it takes. I'm not in a rush. I don't need this done yesterday. I want to do this right." And so that's what we're working on together. Super proud of her. Ah, yes. So the last story I will share today is a client. She's no longer a client of mine, but well, she is, but we're not. Sorry about that interruption. Again, my setup is a little different today, and so I apologize. So back to this mom. We are still, once you're a client of mine, you're always a client of mine. It's kind of like therapy. Um, it's not uncommon to come into therapy for a specific reason. You work on that reason, and then you leave therapy, and then you go on with life, and then something else happens, and then you come back into therapy, and then you work on that particular thing again. And so that's kind of how I see my relationship with this coaching client. um, she is estranged from, or she was estranged, she has since reconciled, um, from her young adult children, and I very young, but adults nonetheless. And so she was estranged from them and has since reconciled. The estrangement came about when the kids were teens, older teens, and there was they were raised in a home. The kids were raised in a home where both parents were highly educated. There was not violence in the home. There was not what you could say is chaos in the home. Um, Kids had lots of opportunities, exposed to many different things, cultures, different, um, really raised with diversity and things along those lines. And yet there was a divorce, and divorce is trauma for kids. And I don't care how well you divorce one another, it's trauma for your kid. And so she reached out to me and was really, she found me through the podcast, and was just really wanting to figure out how she got there, how she ended up in estrangement, and how to get out of it. And she was super curious, still is super curious. One of the many things that I love about her. Um, and she was willing to, again, willing to do the work on herself. Right. So she took the homework, and there were moments where she used to send me, still does, send me video messages, and she would say, "This is hard." She calls me coach. She said, "Coach, this is hard. I don't know how to do this. I, you know, this is painful." But she stuck with it. She stuck with it. She didn't look at it as her kids were punishing her, her kids were being mean to her. Um, Anything along those lines. She was like, "I don't understand this, and I need to understand." And I think that comes from her background in education, being highly educated herself. She just has a naturally curious mind. And so she was ready to dive in. And she did. She dove in head first, did the work, and one one day last fall, I got a video message from her. She said, "Hey, just want to let you know my kids reached out to me and want to get together." And I was so proud of her. I was so proud of her, the work that she had done, the way that she stuck through and went through the uncomfortableness to get to the other side. And today, she is in a healthy relationship with her children. They, you know, go to events together. The kids invite her to things in their life. Um, they have meals together. And while things are not like, quote unquote, they were back in the day, end quote, I mean, that, again, I talk all the time. We don't want things to go back to the way that they were because the way that they were was not healthy because that's, you ended up in estrangement, right? So while she does feel there is a peace that's kind of feels like things are normal again, she recognizes that this is a new normal and that she's willing to continue on that path of healing and growing and allowing her children to have their own lives, to honor those differences, and to be a support for her children. She's really stepped into the consultant role, and as opposed to that of a manager. And I'm just super super proud of her. She's come a long way, and her dedication is to be admired. And that's not to say that not, other parents don't have dedication. They absolutely do. What I oftentimes see is when things get hard emotionally for the parent, they want to disengage. They want to leave coaching. That's when they think that it's the kid's fault and there's, all of those things. And unfortunately, if we kind of look at it like we do labor and birth, um, you know, for most women, you get to a place in the middle of your labor that you're just like, okay, this is not fun anymore. And, kind of wipe your hands and say, I'm done. I got to leave. I can't do this anymore. And as in labor, you know that that's not a possibility. You must move through it. You have to get to the other side. So, in the work that I do with my coaching clients is very similar to that. And this mom did that in spades. So, super proud of her as well. So this is kind of a wrap up. I hope that you can find some inspiration or value or purpose in these stories today. And um, maybe you can recognize yourself in one of these moms. Um, and if you'd like additional support, please feel free to reach out to me regarding any sort of coaching. Um, and I'm happy to help you along your process. And I will say that to those, it's becoming more apparent that um, folks who have reconciled, have their own set of challenges. And as most of you know, who've been listening to this podcast for any length of time, know that I've been reconciled longer than I was estranged from my kids, and I'm still doing the work today. Right. I catch myself when I fall back into an old pattern, but I correct myself in the moment. And um and so it's important that even though you reconcile, to still continue to get support, because you will bump up against challenges moving forward. And having someone to kind of fall back on to say, I mean, even if it's just processing, right? It's just to say, oh my God, I met with my kid this weekend, and this happened and that happened. They said this, I said that. And then I was like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. And, what do I do with that? How do I make repair? Those kinds of things. Those are also things that I work with parents on. So, again, I hope that you found something useful from these stories that I've shared today. Um, and know that there are moms out there who are going through what you're going through, and they're experiencing what you've experienced, and they are achieving reconciliation. So, so don't give up hope. I talk all the time about leaving that little flicker of a flame going. Don't allow it to consume your life. Right? It doesn't need to be a bonfire of hope, but just a little flicker. Don't let that flicker go out, because we never know what tomorrow holds. And sometimes when we least expect it, our kids reach out. So, yeah, I think that's where I'm going to leave things today. So, take care of yourself, be good to yourself, give yourself some grace. Take care. Until next time. This brings this episode to a close. I hope that this time together was time you feel well spent and that you are able to find some takeaway nuggets to help you on your journey, wherever you may be on your estrangement and reconciliation path. If you feel you've received something helpful or positive from this podcast, please consider following us, sharing this podcast with others, leaving a positive review, perhaps entertaining becoming a guest on our show, or following us on social media, on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok under the same name, The Estranged Heart. As a reminder, there is an online support group on Facebook. If you are a estranged mom who identifies as being spiritual and approaches estrangement with a sense of curiosity rather than blame and judgment, and desire to do inner self-work and reflection, please seek us out. We can be found at facebook.com/estranged mothers support group. And lastly, if you are an estranged parent or an estranged adult child and would like to have your story shared on the podcast, anonymously or not, please reach out to me via email at theestrangedheart@gmail.com.